We are always told what to do, what to believe, who to listen to, and who to trust. We're painted a picture of what's normal. But what if we're not seeing the bigger picture? What if we're just pawns in a game we didn't even know we were playing? How would we ever know what's true and what's not? Who's pulling the strings, who controls culture, and why aren't we asking more questions? That's where we come in. Welcome to the Paul Pry Podcast. Our mission? To examine what is causing harm in our community, look closely at why and who benefits from things that hurt our generation, and most importantly, talk about what we can do about it. But here's the thing, you're not just listening. You can be a part of the change. Are you in? Join us at www.monstersoupsociety.com. In this episode, we chat with a public health epidemiologist, Lauren Kidwell, about the current marijuana industry in Oklahoma and the impact it can have on our youth. We'll break down myths that make marijuana seem harmless and dig into why it can actually be dangerous for teens.
Hi, I'm Paul Pry, and this is a Paul Pry Podcast. I'm here with Lauren Kidwell with the Oklahoma Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services.
Hi, I am an epidemiologist with the Oklahoma State Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. And an epidemiologist is someone who looks into the why, how, and where diseases are spreading, and then also how to help stop it or slow diseases from spreading, and then come up with interventions of how to prevent this from happening again.
Awesome. So you explained earlier how you do the tests that they give at schools with the 200 questions that all the kids think are super annoying. But I had a question about how often do you receive the test data from students?
So the Oklahoma Prevention Needs Assessment is done every other school year. So it's performed on 6th graders, 8th graders, 10th, and 12th graders. So it's going to follow those kids from 6th grade all the way through their 12th grade year. So we can see how they progress or if their answers to some questions are changing. So we get that data about 6 months after everybody around the state has completed it.
So how many kids from 6th to 12th grade are using marijuana?
So that's a great question. The last time we did the OPNA survey, which was during the school year of 2021 to 2022, we saw that about 19% have used marijuana in their lifetime. Now, if you want to break it down by grade, we saw that about 5.3% of 6th graders were using, and it goes up from there. So 8th graders, about 13.1% had ever used marijuana, 23% of 10th graders had ever used, and 36.3% of 12th graders had ever used marijuana.
Wow. It's crazy that so many 6th graders are using.
I know. And the crazy thing is that when you look at it over time, so if we go back and look at it in 2017 to 2018 school year, only 3.4% of 6th graders were using or had used in their lifetime.
Wow. That shows us, I think, just how easy it is nowadays to access it, compared to
before.
Back then, yeah.
Yeah. I think one thing to remember is that medical marijuana was introduced into our state in 2018. So I kind of like to look at it as before medical marijuana and after medical marijuana, because we can see a complete difference in those rates.
Yeah. And what are some of the risks of using marijuana underage?
There's a lot of risks of using marijuana underage. One of the things that we see that when kids under 18 use marijuana, they're less likely to apply themselves in school. They're less likely to want to choose a career path. And they're also more likely to want to use other illegal substances.
And what are a few long-term effects of using marijuana?
Some of the long-term effects of marijuana are still not really known because there have not been a lot of studies on that among kids who start using when they're, 15 and all the way through adulthood. But we do see that the size of their brain actually starts to shrink. They start to have smoker's lung, just like you would see in someone who smokes just normal cigarettes. And we also start to see issues with the cardiovascular system in that their veins get smaller and their heart has a hard time pumping blood over time. And then again, you get into addiction. So there's a lot of things that can happen, but there's a lot of things that still need to be studied, especially when it comes to kids using for the first time and continuing to use when they're very young.
What are the risks of driving while under the influence of marijuana?
A lot of people think that it's probably safe to drive under the influence of marijuana. Marijuana does a lot of things to your brain, just like alcohol does. There are severe consequences, such as not being able to see how far things are away, or it might blur your vision because sometimes marijuana makes people very tired. You might fall asleep at the wheel and crash, hurt yourself, or hurt others.
So I think a lot of people think it's not that big of a deal because I think there's a lot of miscommunication with the risks of marijuana. Like, I'm sure some people think it's safer than like cigarettes or alcohol, which
Yes.
I really don't understand because it's still very much a drug.
Yes, absolutely. And marijuana, especially medical marijuana in the state of Oklahoma, is kind of pushed to us as something that's natural. It's a plant. It can't hurt us. It's just a plant that comes from the ground. When in actuality, there are so many things that are in the marijuana that a lot of people don't know about. Things that are added into the marijuana once it has been processed at that processing plant. There are a lot of things that go into that rather than just taking a flower off of a plant. And also, once you kind of get into studying marijuana, you can almost look at it as a food. Food has evolved over time because we genetically modify it to make it easier for people to digest, or maybe in a way people need a food in a certain way. I love to use the example of corn. If we go back hundreds of years and look at some of the American Indians that were living in the Midwest or here in Oklahoma, their corn would be unrecognizable to us nowadays. And the same thing with marijuana. Even looking back into like the 1960s and 70s, the marijuana of that day would be almost unrecognizable today because of how it has been genetically modified and just modified throughout time by different individuals, and there's different versions and everything. So it's definitely not as natural as people believe it is.
For sure. And recently we've heard about like marijuana being sold in chips and cereal bags. So what can you tell us about that?
Yes. So in the state of Oklahoma, marijuana has to be in a package that does not appeal to children. It's in the state statute that is attached to the state question that made medical marijuana legal here in the state. But we have been seeing, and the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics and the Oklahoma Medical Marijuana Authority agents that go out and do inspections have seen more and more examples of medical marijuana edibles looking like our everyday food, like Fruit Loops, like Doritos, or jelly beans. And it's illegal to sell those products in Oklahoma. So a lot of these state agencies assume that it is coming in from the illegal market. So it's coming in with some of the shipments of marijuana, or it's coming in across state lines or from somewhere, because it is illegal to package those products like that and also sell them in dispensaries. But there have been cases where the Oklahoma Medical Marijuana Authority agents have found those products in certain dispensaries and had to seize them and take them away.
And how many of these dispensaries are in Oklahoma compared to other states?
There are so many medical marijuana dispensaries in the state of Oklahoma. So on the Oklahoma Medical Marijuana Authority website, it says that as of September 5th, 2023, there are 2,761 dispensaries in the state, which is more than any other state in the United States.
And you told me earlier about how some of these dispensaries are either processing or growing illegally. And what is law enforcement doing to shut down these illegal businesses?
Yes. So some of these growers are growing marijuana illegally in that they are not giving them a tag once they sprout out of the ground, or they might be growing them off to the side in a field only a few hundred yards away, so no one would see it if they were to come and inspect it. But now the Oklahoma Medical Marijuana Authority, along with the Oklahoma Attorney General and the Bureau of Narcotics, are going in and doing these compliance checks on growers and processors to see if the numbers all add up. And if they don't, they investigate why there's more marijuana being produced on this farm or being processed in this plant than they say there is, and they will seize all of that medical marijuana that's being grown and shut it down. It takes time, but if you look at the news over the last, I would say 6 months, you can find at least one story every week or every 2 weeks of a huge grower or processor that has been shut down because of growing illegal substances or shipping out marijuana to other states, which they are not allowed to do.
I know a lot of states have medical marijuana, and how does Oklahoma compare to that?
Yes, so there are about 30 states that have passed laws to have either medical marijuana or just legal marijuana in the state. When Oklahoma passed State Question 788, it introduced a lot of unknowns for a lot of questions that people had. When we look at the medical marijuana in Oklahoma and compare it to, let's say, Iowa, Iowa has a list of diagnoses that you have to even apply for a medical marijuana license in that state. Whereas Oklahoma, you do not have to have any type of diagnosis to receive a medical marijuana card. All it takes is, for an adult patient, one doctor's signature saying that you can get medical marijuana. And for a kid under the age of 18, it takes 2 doctor signatures. And then the parent of that child will have to apply for a medical marijuana caregiver license. So they will hold the card for that child. When we look at the number of dispensaries, which we talked about a little bit before, and again, going back to the state of Iowa, they only have 3 dispensaries statewide for all of their medical marijuana licensee holders, whereas the state of Oklahoma has about 2,700. And if we look at that a little bit deeper, if we take all of the people that have a medical marijuana license in the state, which is about 10% of the population, which shocks a lot of people because many people in the state that I talk to or just talk to out in public will say, oh, at least 30 or 40% of Oklahomans have a medical marijuana card. And I correct them and say it's actually 10%. And they're shocked. So every single dispensary, if we take it and look at it with the number of people that have a medical marijuana license, one single dispensary would serve 40 individuals that have a medical marijuana license, which is shocking. That's a lot of dispensaries for not a lot of people. So that's one thing that really stands out in the Oklahoma medical marijuana overview compared to other states.
Yeah, that's really shocking. I was kind of curious how they're only serving 40 people.
Yes. So if you look at that state question 788 again, which is everything relating to medical marijuana and how it's set up here in the state, there was no limit on the number of dispensaries that could be open in the state of Oklahoma. So it kind of started a heyday of the number of dispensaries that are open right now. Because if you drive down Classen, if you drive down May here in Oklahoma City, if you drive down any street in Tulsa, there's a medical marijuana dispensary almost on every corner. So there's nothing in that state law that says there are a specific number of dispensaries that can be open in the state. Now they have put a limit on the number now, or I guess I want to re-say that. There's currently a moratorium on the number of licensees for dispensaries that are being allowed because the system was so overwhelmed and they had so many people in line to get a dispensary license. They had to shut down that line and say, nope, we cannot accept any more applicants who want to open a dispensary in the state of Oklahoma.
Yeah, it's really crazy that so many people would just want to do that and that they wouldn't have any, restrictions at all. I think that's a little bit irresponsible of them.
Kind of is. It is a little bit. And I think looking back in 2018, I don't think many people would have guessed that it would be where it is now, that we would have 2,700 dispensaries open in the state. In March of 2023, so this past March, voters said no to recreational medical marijuana. And I think it is because of what they have seen happen in the state. How many dispensaries are open? The effects of having these dispensaries open. Sometimes it leaves a smell in some businesses if you're right next to it. And then people don't want to come to your business because it smells like marijuana all the time. So I think the people in the state are really kind of pushing against and pushing for more regulation when it comes to medical marijuana.
Yes, and I'm just going to jump off something you said earlier. We have, actually, this recording studio, we have a firsthand business owner that we're going to interview later about that, the negative effects of just having so many dispensaries all around. Like, you walk down the street and you'll see, one on every corner, like you said. And I think it's getting out of hand at this point.
It is. And since the Oklahoma Medical Marijuana Authority is their own standalone state agency, just like the Department of Mental Health and just like the State Department of Health, they are now really getting into wanting to regulate things and getting into doing compliance checks and making sure that these businesses are following the rules, because if they're not, they're going to get shut down or they're going to be fined a lot of money, which some of these dispensaries probably don't have, because, again, you can look at it as how many people are actually going into this singular dispensary when there's 5 down the street. So,
Lauren, I think we're almost out of time, but do you have any final thoughts on this matter?
yeah, I think it's really important to note what you guys are doing, and what a lot of state agencies are trying to do is prevent this becoming an even greater issue. One of the things at the State Department of Mental Health that we're focusing on will be trying to understand how people store their medical marijuana and where they're storing it, to teach them about safe storage so that young kids don't get into it. One other thing is that we really want to promote education on using marijuana and the effects of it if you start at a young age, and also what it looks like long term, and just trying to prevent young kids from using marijuana in general. So what you guys are doing is great. I have not met a youth coalition like you guys.
Thank you for coming to talk to us about this.
You are so welcome, and I love talking to people about this because it's one of the passions that I have at my job, and one of the things that I really take pride in at the Department of Mental Health.